wonder if you'll be there when it's all ended. You keep your silence, but you give us a sign to let us know we are always befriended. Oh, God of mysteries beyond our thinking. Oh, God of mysteries gone, gone beyond our thinking. Happy is the one who comes to you. Happy is the one, happy are the two. And we dwell in your house, and we eat at your table, and we say the prayers as our hearts are able. Oh, God of mystery beyond our thinking. Oh, God of mystery, gone, gone, gone beyond our thinking. You bless the years as they roll on by, and the days are a sign of what you're thinking. We want eternity, and you give us time, and our own lives seem to pass while we're blinking. Oh, God of mysteries beyond our thinking. Oh, God of mysteries gone far beyond our thinking. We ask for light, you give us night and day to help us truly find our own way. We want you only, yet you keep us apart.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful winter season. That song that you were listening to was Bless the Years by Jason Schulman. And on behalf of the Foundation for Non-Duality, we welcome you to our 12th Roundtable discussion, where we, a panel of Jason Schulman's senior students and teachers, discuss the interface between ideas about non-duality and our daily lives. We are excited to be here with you. And as you may or may not know, the Foundation for Non-Duality is dedicated to making the principles of non-dual thinking and practice, as articulated by Jason Schulman, available to the greater public for the purpose of transforming the consciousness of individuals in order to help alleviate suffering in the world. So these principles and their practical applications focus on the unitive connection between personal and transcendent consciousness as the foundational basis for change and for healing. Jason Schulman sees the study of non duality, especially in its practical applications in everyday living, as part of the healing of the human soul. The aim is to live our lives as both healing and healthy individuals who are aware of and connected to the entire web of being, including the totality of who we are. Living the totality of our being means including all of our human parts in our awareness, from our great courage and longing to connect to our many imperfections that work against these aims. Jason Schulman's teachings are based on kindness toward the self and others. And the work of the foundation is to actualize this kindness in everyday life. If you don't know Jason Schulman, over the past 40 years of teaching, he's worked to reconcile the deistic or relative paths of liberation with the consciousness of Buddhism and other non-theistic paths to create a truly non-dual path of healing, one that does not exclude any aspect of reality. His work emphasizes the healing of the personal ego and its rightful place in any path that seeks liberation from ignorance and the awakening of compassion. It also seeks to bring the human world, with its imperfections, into alignment with the realization of transcendent awareness. In this way, we develop a conscious awakening to the sacredness of every sentient being and every time-bound moment. And now, before we dive into today's conversation, I'm going to lead us through a short meditation. So just take a moment to settle in, and your feet can be on the ground. You don't need to be standing perfectly erect. You don't want to be slouched either. Just kind of find a comfortable position and begin just by being with your breathing. So be with your breath as it is. Don't get caught up in thinking your breath should be deeper or more regular or more even or better in some way. Your breathing, just as it is what's keeping you alive, and that's sufficient. So just be with your breathing for a moment. So your intention in this meditation is to invite everything in. Begin with the sounds that are around you right now. Maybe you hear the sounds of other people talking in the background. Maybe a car horn or a siren. Maybe the wind or a bird. Invite all of those sounds in. We want them to be with you. We want them to be here. And now, invite all of the parts of yourself to be with you right now. The small, frightened parts, the courageous parts, the lazy parts, the devoted parts. actually say to yourself in your mind, you, the one who forgets to be kind to yourself, be here with me. Come in. You, the selfish one, be here. You, the one who is argumentative, be here. You, the one who remembers God from time to time, be here as well. And you, the one who forgets God from time to time, be here too. Invite all of the parts of yourself and all the parts of your environment to be present right now in this moment. Whatever comes into your heart or mind, whether it is a difficulty or whether it's a great insight, it doesn't matter. They're all treated equally. Invite them in. Let's all be with us for a few minutes. And gently bring yourself back to the room and normal waking consciousness when you're ready. And we're back. So, this is an opportunity today to have a conversation about our spiritual lives. And what we want to do here today is invite conversation. So, there'll be time for audience interaction, and we'd love for you to participate with questions and comments. I'm watching the chat, so as soon as the questions come in, we'll find a time, we'll address it, and it really helps us share what we know when we can interact with the audience in that way. And today I'm joined by Andrew Resnick, Henrik Nordmark, and Damon Farnum. My name's Tim Rothschild, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. So, gentlemen, I want to know, and anybody can jump in to get started, how has non-duality helped you in your lives? Has it made an impact? Do you remember to do it? I want to hear a little bit about that and sort of what your relationship to it is and, that sort of thing. And anybody can jump in when you're ready.
Maybe we can start by clarifying a little bit. When we say non-duality and you say, do you do it? What are we talking about?
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. What are we really asking?
For me, I'll just say that for me, non-duality is the nature of reality. It's also a state of consciousness. So when I think of non-duality, I think how everything is included in a certain way. And it's like, all right, so what does it mean to live your life when you include everything and you know that on some level everything is connected, right? What's that do to your consciousness? How can we use that practically in our day to day in a way that actually helps relieve our own suffering and others? Can it help free us from our stuff? And the last thing I'll say is I think very much Jason's work is about exploring the interface between the non-dual nature of reality and the human ego's job to keep us alive and to simultaneously, in its healing position, to be in relationship to everything. So that's
Right.
kind of, yeah.
So I'm gonna dig a little deeper on the question. That's really helpful. So so you mentioned the state of consciousness, and these kind of ideas of everything is connected, we include everything. Is that an intellectual idea that we have, or is that a lived experience of a state of consciousness? How do we get from that idea of, yes, everything's connected? You could read that on an Instagram post. Everything's connected. It's all one. Include it. That's great. But then how do we embody that consciousness besides just repeating it to ourselves when we're in moments of trouble?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great question, and I think that kind of gets at the crux of like how do we go from like the conceptual, the theoretical, like the learning about this kind of thing into, if I'm hearing you correctly, into like the embodied, practical, experiential, like how do we make this real in the moment for ourselves in our lives? Because if we're not doing that, or at least attempting to do that, then is there any value in it at all? I mean, it's just an idea, it's a concept. So I'm just going to think about this for myself as I talk here. So for me, I do start with, exactly what Tim's talking about, which is that sense, or that, now to me, it's a very felt reality that, this world, this universe, everything physical, everything emotional, everything mental, um, essentially is one world. So that's a great idea. But to make it very practical, what that ends up meaning for me is that in every moment, how I feel, feelings that I don't like, my impulse to push away feelings that I don't like, um, sensations in my body, ones that I'm okay with, ones that I'm not okay with. So, like on a very practical level, it ends up being my moment to moment to moment experience of myself, and realizing that, every single thing essentially makes up part of the whole. And so, for me, and this is the way I practice this work, is that I take every single thing as it's sort of being experienced. And, what I'm trying to do is kind of have room for it to exist. Let it be here in my body, my feelings. And this is quite honestly sometimes the work of this work, is like, how do you make room for a feeling or a thought that may be terrible, like you don't want, you want to really get rid of. But then, what happens is the more that I do that, the more that I like make room inside of me for, I could be dramatic and say something like despair, or I could say something like anxiety, or, like this morning I'm tired, and there's a part of me that feels like when I'm tired, I'm not good enough. I need to somehow be different than that. So I'm showing up with tiredness, and I'm also showing up with like my feeling of like I'm not good enough because I'm tired. Now, can I make room for that inside of me as I'm here with you guys? And then what happens for me is, as I do that, it's almost like I relax into a bigger sense of myself. So now I've made room for more of creation inside of me. And now I feel like there's like, I don't know, there's more of me. There's more room for all of it. It's like more of existence can exist at one time inside of me without like bumping into itself and fighting with itself. So that's kind of a long answer, but I think that was a reasonable way of describing kind of like, how I work with this a lot of times.
So I'd like to jump straight in with a story from my life. So this happened many years ago, and I think I must have been maybe in my second or third year of non-dual Kabbalistic healing training at a Society of Souls, and I had by that point left the Netherlands, where I'd been living for a while. I'd moved to the UK. And let me preface all of this by saying that the Netherlands is a lovely country. I have a lot of Dutch friends. There are many things that I recall very fondly. But at that moment in time, for me, the Netherlands was also associated with a lot of very painful memories. I went through a very bad breakup while I was there with a long-term girlfriend, and I just wasn't happy with my life there at many levels. And every time I came back to the Netherlands, actually to this non-dual Kabbalistic healing training down in Nijmegen, I found myself feeling a lot of those sort of negative feelings and associations that I had with the life that I had led in Amsterdam. And then there was this time when I came, and I've been doing a lot of the non-dual practices that we had learned from Jason, practices like form anxiety and possibly impersonal movement, although I'm not sure if I had learned that one by that point yet or not. But certainly I've been practicing a lot. And I came to the country, and the way I can best describe it is that things did not feel as magnetic to me. Like, yes, I could access the memories of things like, oh yes, I remember, I know, that street corner and that tram station and this and that, and it would evoke, yeah, the memories of my life in the Netherlands, but it did so in a way where I didn't feel like miasmatically trapped by those emotions. All of a sudden, everything seemed so much more spacious, very alive and vivid, but everything just kind of had its own place. Everything was allowed to exist just the way it was. As I said, it's not that I all of a sudden had like amnesia about my previous life there, but yeah, I didn't feel beholden to those connotations, those memories, those associations. And I think that's the first time I really understood at a very kind of deep bodily level what this kind of work can do for one. And I hadn't planned it to be that way. It's just something that sort of happened to me as a result of doing these non-dual practices. And yeah, I think that also kind of inspired me to then, become a healer in this work, and I still see the same thing happening in non-dual healing sessions today, where you just kind of give everything the space to exist, and yeah, it's lovely, and it's very, very helpful, even if the problems don't necessarily disappear, but your relationship to things has changed.
So it seems like, based on what you're saying, what Damon's saying, that there's less suffering when, and maybe that word's, I mean, in some instances it's the right word, and some it might seem a little heavy, but something happens when we practice this in a way. There's also I think there can be a sense, I know I've had this for a long time, that when you're in this type of more open consciousness, maybe it's supposed to be magical and amazing, and you're in full bliss mode, and the universe is speaking your name, like it's this out there mystical experience, but it kind of it sounds like it's almost ordinary in a certain type of way.
Yeah, it certainly felt very ordinary walking through, the train platforms in Amsterdam.
It wasn't like you were on a mushroom trip.
No, not at all.
Seeing God in every single person's eyes in that moment.
Things felt extraordinarily ordinary, and yet substantially different, because I was no longer miasmatically trapped by those emotions that had previously haunted me.
It sounds like, somehow doing the non-dual work allowed you to have your history, but your history didn't have you in the same way.
Yes.
Right? And I'm just thinking about also what Damon said, right? So Damon got to a place in his development where he was able to notice these things. And I think part of non-duality is we notice that the world is built upon opposites, right? Hot and cold, near and far, tired or very much awake, like in Damon's case, right? And usually what happens is, if you haven't started to notice the world is built on opposites, what happens is we end up choosing an opposite, one side of the coin, based on our prejudices, our judgments, our histories, right? And part of doing the non-dual work, for me at least, one of the practices I do is I slow things down enough so that when I encounter one of life's opposites, right? Because life is always offering us one side of a whole. When I notice that, I remember the other side. And I take a look at and I examine my judgments and my preferences and these sorts of things. And that way I can bring the personal back into that non-dual oneness experience. I can notice the opposites and I can choose from a freer place, because I know I might prefer hot over cold. But just like the meditation that we opened up with, I invite them all in. I invite hot and cold. And instead, there's a different, more whole relationship to it. And the choice comes out of that doing, out of that noticing. So I can see through my preferences and judgments and still make that choice. Does that make sense?
It does. But the question that comes up in me is, what happens if one of those preferences is really uncomfortable?
Yeah, I would say,
like why would somebody want to do that? I'm speaking,
right.
as the skeptical listener at the moment. But like, yeah.
Give an example. Like what?
Well,
Make it even more.
Well, I'll take it broad first, because the sense is we usually know at some points deep inside us what the more life enhancing choice is going to be.
Or we
And
think
so if we think, right, it's never guaranteed, right? We don't know. We don't really know. But there's a certain, if you take a moment to think about it, you could say, all right, I need to be in the cold for my health for some reason, but I prefer hot. I have a habit of choosing hot over cold. So now that I'm awake to it, I can wrestle with that a little bit. And maybe I need to do cold, but I need to get some support around it first, because otherwise I'm going to keep choosing hot. So anyway.
To me, the thing that just came up as you were saying that is, and on some level, I like that idea of the more kind of life affirming choice in a way. I think I'm remembering the words you said, but I think when we turn towards that discomfort, what I think part of what's scary about it, aside from the discomfort of it, is that we don't really know what's going to happen. there's a sort of sense of actually letting go of certainty and of the script in your head of the next thing that's going to come up and what you think is supposed to go on, because in many ways it's a new you're turning towards the world in a new way. You know what it is to, so let's say, for example, let's say I have a big rush of anxiety about something. And, the typical reaction would be to turn away from it in some way, distract myself, go on my phone, look for some sort of way to ease it, to just make it better. That's the way I've done it for many, many, many decades. And I know what the result of that is going to be to some extent. I know that that at some point it'll lessen. I'll kind of just, grin and bear it to some extent, and life will go on. Then I know I've, as of late, been making more the choice of, okay, this is here. What is it to stop and just let it be here? So, and just let this exist the way it is. Sometimes when I do that, well, actually, first off, I don't know what's going to happen. That's part of what's a little scary about it, is that I really enter the moment-to-moment experience of that thing, and I don't know how it's going to unfold. But what I can say is that as I've done that, and as sometimes it feels like, oh, maybe this is too big for me, it turns out it's not. And it turns out that it's kind of what you said earlier, Tim, of, I can now be having that experience as opposed to that experience having me. But it requires a certain type of turning around, really, and staying.
Right. And like, I don't know about you guys, but when I do, my version of what you're talking about, like, I'm kind of turning towards whatever that uncomfortable thing that I don't like that I'm experiencing. And I'm trying to like let it come closer. Like, okay, I'm actually coming, and at first there's this almost experience of like, I'm trying to let it in, but simultaneously I'm pushing it away.
Yeah.
And then and it's like, it's almost like there's a, this, and then sometimes there's this then moment where all of a sudden it's different. And I don't know what happened. I'm like, did it go away? Did I push it away? Did I let it in? But it's like it's the moment where that fight sort of stops.
Resistance ends. Yeah.
And I'm like, something's now very different. And the battle seems to be over in that moment. And then I'm able to like go on with my life. Yeah.
Yeah, the battle ends in that moment. But like, because I think what you're describing, Damon, is there's like am I doing it right? Am I with it enough? Do I go into it more? Is it still here? Is the thing that's supposed to happen happening? And that's part of the battle in a way. That's the wrestling that's going on, because we want a result. Is this working? Is this working? Seems to be the kind of the thought that's running a lot of it. And then at some point, as we're with it enough, to me, maybe part of the moment you're describing is the realization of, oh, I'm already in touch with it. It's here already.
Right. It's that moment where you realize, oh, this is it.
This is it.
It's all right here. I'm already, it's like the fish realizing it's in water. You're like, oh, yeah. It's all of this right here. Yeah.
Then you can breathe, and then, and the next thing.
And just to make sure we're not over idealizing too much here. I mean, obviously, our preferences still exist. I mean, they might shift, and sometimes they might even go away. But I might not like natto or whatever, and that's not necessarily going to change, right? It's more that even our dislikes will have a right to exist, and along with everything else.
Well, actually, I think that's such a great point, Henrik, that the dislike still has a right to exist. Because, and I think in some way that's what, Damon's describing, which is, when we're trying to get closer, in some ways, there's this hidden belief of maybe if I get close enough, the dislike will go away. And that's kind of what we're doing in some way. We're trying to do this sneaky, maneuver to get rid of it by pretending we actually like it. And when the dislike can be there and it can still be there and it's all there, all of it. And again, not making all of it there so that we can get rid of it. It's,
Right.
our unhealed egos are very, very, they're very smart. They're very, very smart, and they're always looking for a loophole. They really don't want to change.
One way I think about this is that there's that moment where we want to make a choice. We want to, we have our preferences and maybe choose this preference, which might be, but we're when we talk about this, I'm kind of doing that because I feel like I need to do it to be okay. Like to save myself from not being okay, whatever that might mean. And then there's a difference between, sometimes, and again, I don't want to idealize this, but when we can, let it in enough, there becomes, again, I'm really, I don't know, I don't want to make this sound idealized, but where it's like there becomes a freedom to choose because we want to choose, not because we have to choose to be okay or to feel like it's going to keep us safe. So it's a different kind of choosing.
And Damon, the other thing that comes up as you're saying that is that there seems to be an attitude that's being cultivated towards one's experience in general, where we're not trying to idealize a certain experience of now I got to the place where I can choose and the suffering's less. There's actually an attitude of, Jason says, practice is enlightenment, right? And so it's the approach of this thing is here, and instead of maybe going into a whole spiral about this thing is here, there's now an attitude of openness and an attitude of a willingness to at least begin to work with what is showing up. And that seems to be just as important a result as some experience of when the resistance goes away.
I'm going to try to talk about this in a way for a second that's very personal. And also, quite honestly, extreme for me, it was extremely, I don't want to say life-saving, but very practical. So, in my divorce, okay, it's a big one, right? It's a very big one. For months, I went through every feeling, every state of mind, every that you could imagine, where confusion, huge fear, like, oh my God, what am I doing? Fear about life trajectory, fear about, mistakes, fear about money, fear about, how the world perceives you. And these are deep feelings that go through all of you, and they take you over and they consume you. And on and on and on. Anybody who's been through this, or we've all been through very, very intense life circumstances. So it's like whatever the circumstance, it's like the feelings can just kind of like become you. It's like this, you're it's you, and you're just trying to go through your day, and there's so much there. And exactly how we're talking about, like by doing this work and, working with the experience and, trying to like, okay, how am I fighting this experience? And actually like recognizing that even this experience, even this crazy, horrendous feeling, has a right to exist in the oneness of creation, which is how I personally look at it. This feeling, this absolutely unacceptable feeling. How, and in that moment, I like would go on walks and let it, like literally, like exactly like we're saying, recognize, oh, this is what's happening. Here it is. And then I would able to like let it actually come closer to me. And when the fear when we think let something come closer to me is that it's going to consume us, it's going to become us, it's going to take us over. And ironically, or paradoxically, what would actually happen is it's like it would go from like this to like this, and then it was like me going through my day, and the feeling or the experience, it didn't go away, it was with me, but it wasn't hijacking me in the same way or consuming me. And it would then like maybe change into something else. And so it became this other experience of going through, and and this became my practice for months and months and months and months.
Hmm.
But I felt sane. Like I felt, even though, like I would talk to friends and helpers, and, and you could say, no, I'm very much not okay. And I'm okay. I am okay. And I felt sane, and I felt like I was meeting life in the moment. And it was okay.
Thanks for sharing that, Damon. One of the things you said, what was your sentence about the oneness of life? When these feelings would show up.
For me, and this is the way I do it, is that I very much recognize that everything in creation is part of the oneness. Everything in creation has a right to exist. Everything in creation, at its essence, this is good. This may sound controversial, but is an expression, an expression of of the absolute, of the oneness, of the, and so when you take that idea very seriously, and not just as a nice spiritual ideal, when you actually say, no, if this idea is real, then that means that like this horrendous thing that I'm feeling somehow can be recognized, in that way.
Exactly. It almost, what came up for me as you were talking is that it seems like the typical position we might take towards that horrendous feeling is that of other, is that of something separate from me. And I think often when we view something as other, it's viewed as dangerous, it's viewed as the enemy, something to fight, something to destroy, because it's not me. It's, I mean, put it simply, it's dual. It's separate. It is two. It is not me. It is that. It is other. It is separate. And what you actually seem to be describing is a process of becoming very intimate. I mean, your hands were doing this when you were, you're becoming very intimate with the thing. You're touching it. It's touching you. And in a way where you're allowing that to happen.
Right.
It's an interaction where there's communication between both of you.
Right.
both. And then maybe you discover that it's not a separate thing. It's not an enemy.
Because in a lot of ways, when we're not doing that, it's still here.
It's still here, exactly.
We're like pushing it, we're keeping it in our unconscious. So instead of it being like, this thing that kind of moves with us through life, it's this messy jumble where it's like it's through us and we kind of don't see it, and it's still expressing itself in our life. We're just like, we're trying to keep it at bay. So it's not like it goes away, like, anyway, yeah. This is hard stuff, by the way. This is really in practical, moment to moment, day to day. This is really hard, but oh my God, it has saved me personally. It has saved my life, and that is why I get so passionate about this work.
It's hard because it was things that you've all said before already, and the fact that we're trying to save ourselves, right? So it's like if we want to include everything and live our lives that way, that means that from time to time we're going to encounter something that terrifies us, or something that's wounded us in the past, things that we desperately feel like we need to avoid. So if we haven't done particular kinds of psychological work or otherwise, we may notice that we're only choosing one side of life over the other. Or like Damon is saying, you might notice that there's something that I'm keeping out, separate from myself, and I've judged this thing that's separate from me as a major problem, and it's something that I need to get rid of in order to feel whole again or something like that, right? It's like this comes into my life. I don't even notice I do it. I judge it. I say, this is a problem. It's got to go. And then I'll be happy, right? So we need to wake up to the fact that we're doing that first, and then do just like Damon said, you invite it in, right? And when you invite it in, and Damon, I got a picture in my mind when you're talking about that of being so full of something that it actually spills out, and that spilling out didn't feel like a problem because I realized it was spilling out into something larger than you that you're already a part of. And there's something about that paradoxical movement from keeping something separate out of self-protection to inviting it in, where now, and again, you mentioned the fish waking up to the water. It's like now the water's swimming the fish again. And there's something that happens that can make it more tolerable, or spacious or whatever. Or at bare minimum, when you're invited in, you'll know how to ask for help. But, at least you're not, you've opened yourself up to more possibilities.
That's a nice way of putting it. You're opening yourself up to more possibilities, and you might not know what they are. You don't know what they are ahead of time. That's part of it. But you've tried one path, 40,000 times, and it hasn't worked, and seems to lead to the same place. And now you're maybe beginning to burrow in a new direction. And there's also, I think, Damon said this, but that moment to moment doing of it is really it can be really difficult and not very romantic. It can be very gritty, and I, I know I noticed in myself that like I kind of want a bit of a reward for doing it. I'll be like, look at me, I'm doing, that little child in me wanting some sort of recognition, but it's not, that's not the way it works. It's you're doing it for you and for your and coming back to that, if this is really true, if everything is of one thing, then this is not a separate thing, and this deserves to be seen and allowed. And the truth is, I don't know what it is. That I have I have a concept for it. I can name it. I can call it despair or fear or sadness. But actually what it is this experience that's happening in this moment. And I don't know what the next thing is. All I know is what it is to allow this to be here right now.
I imagine a lot of people get caught up, and I've experienced this in my own self, trying to share this work with other people. And when I tell them to invite it in, it's like, now what? Okay, you know, because I've been a problem solver before. I could solve this problem, and I solve problems. That's what I do. So this is a problem. Why would I invite it in? And what would you say? I mean, I'm genuinely curious. If somebody asks, okay, I'll invite it in. I'll stop problem solving this only, and I'll give it a chance. Now I feel like shit. What now?
Feel like shit.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my somewhat snarky answer. I mean, I think I would say that now what I mean, I can't tell you how many now whats have passed through my brain over the last however long. I think that's the most normal reaction to, you're stepping into new waters and you dip your toe in, you're like, I'm doing okay, now what? Is that enough? That's the old trying to reassert itself in a way. And I think you say, now what? You stay with what's there. Are you bored? Okay. Well, now you're bored. You were something else earlier. Now what? You're feeling like shit? Okay. Stay there for 7 seconds.
And
Why would I do that? Well,
Actually, that's an interesting question because, well, I mean, all of us are here are pretty practiced at this, and we've learned a whole bunch of meditation techniques and other practices to get into these states. But I think if you just tell somebody's like, well, let everything in, period, that could be quite challenging and difficult to tolerate if actually done seriously. So I don't know if there's anything we can say that might help with that. Do it tiny bits at a time, perhaps.
tiny bits at a time.
Yeah. And, do it in, like it's interesting to remember back in my life, when I started working with the different ways that suffering, and I've had, just for whatever reason, the way I'm built, I've had to work with a lot. Like I'm very, I'm very transparent with life. And so I've had to work with a lot of different things that I feel and experience, and giving a place to them. Like, for instance, I've used journaling as a tool. And the other day I was thinking about it, and it's not like a tool to like work things out or like make sense of things, but it actually is like a tool to explore and try to have a relationship with what's happening in the moment. Like, what is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? This like, and it's not like I'm trying to figure it out, but I'm trying to like, okay, can I have a little bit more contact with it? Can I let myself have a little bit more contact with it? And you do it in these ways where, and I'd say it's also okay. Like if there's a time when you've had enough,
Yep.
then you've had enough. Then you've had enough. Then that's enough. This isn't like an all or nothing kind of thing. It's like like sometimes the kind of contact that we're talking about is a drop. It's a moment. It doesn't have to be a flood. Like we're not letting in the universe, all at once. It's the right amount. And sometimes it's like the right amount is like that. And that's it, and then you go on and then there's another moment and another. And so there's a lot of kindness, or there should be a lot of kindness in how you engage, with the kind of processes that we're talking about. This isn't like Western world of like, trying to achieve, some high level of achievement, in non-dual intimacy. This is like, what's the right amount?
You know what I'm hearing? I was going to say exactly that, the kindness. I was going to say, if you didn't make it, explicit there, because it's kindness, and also working with this over time. There is skillful means, right? Like, when do I know to invite more in, or when do I want to invite the fact that I have defenses and that's okay, right? So it's like, how can you be with what's here in a way where you honor the fact that we are all unfolding? And the other piece that we haven't mentioned yet is the trustworthiness of life when we live this way. There's a certain rhythm, and there's a certain kind of being with what's here consciously that lets that next piece, whatever that is, show up. And one of the things that non-duality practice has changed for me is, I'm not so willful anymore. I don't feel like I have to do everything. The doing that I have to do is to be awake enough and willing enough to stand at the interface between the known and the unknown, and feel like that's where the magic happens. That's where, if I'm not trying to control the whole show, or at least maybe if I'm awake to the fact that I'm controlling it, then something else can come in and help me change the things that I need to change in my life. And so there's a trustworthiness that I've found.
Tim, you kind of glossed over, I think, such an important thing, and just that idea of, if you said, at least if I'm trying to control or become awake to the fact that I'm trying to control. And I think that awakeness is that seems to be the key to it in many ways, is all of these things seem to be happening on their own, and we're doing them without really becoming awake to the fact that we are doing them. And that awakeness allows some space, and it allows a more conscious decision, and it allows a new possibility.
Yeah, you can't change anything if you're not awake to it, right? That's why I do the practices. That's the sole reason why I do my practices, because I hope that by doing it, maybe in the morning, maybe a few minutes here or there, that it can help me remember to pay attention. And if I'm paying attention, then I have a shot at not repeating the same thing over and over and over again, and maybe for once participating in the creation of the world, being a part of it, rather than sleepwalking through it, trying to survive in some way.
I was drawn to something you were saying, Damon, earlier about journaling, and how it wasn't like work things out and like magically resolve all your psychological issues around it, but just giving space to all these different things that were in your consciousness. And it makes me wonder if that's perhaps the reason why something like art therapy might be effective as well, because it's a way of giving a place to different things in a very literal and situated way. Like, I don't know, I mean, it doesn't have. I'm thinking like, Guernica, that painting by Picasso could just be like an expression of all the trauma that Picasso saw during the Spanish Civil War, and but I mean, I think for all of us, just articulating, giving expression, even if it doesn't resolve things fully, is so useful.
I mean, good therapy, right? Where it's like, you're able to like put everything out there, without it being judged, without trying to, ultimately, necessarily fix it or solve it. But it's allowed to like have a place. And, I mean, it's interesting too. Like, I know we talk a lot about in this setting, and I'm aware of the time, is that, and I just want to share this, is that because, you were joking, Andrew, about kind of the carrot, like, that we want something, something at the end of the rainbow here. And for me, there's a lot of pleasure in opening up to life like this. There ends up being, first, actually a tremendous amount of pleasure at this point in my life, not all the time, but sometimes, in the process itself. when I discover something new about myself, which happens like, I'd say reasonably several times a week, I actually find it exciting now. I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing this for so long and I never quite saw this way that I, like protect myself from life. And I'm excited about it now. Instead of like, oh my God, I'm terrible. I'm like, wow, that's astounding. And then things like pleasure and creativity.
Mm.
Even, I'm going to even, and you guys are welcome to disagree with me, but even spiritual exploration. I personally have found that the more open and transparent I have allowed myself to be with myself, because I am simply a part of the universe, that it seems like that I have also, it's like I'm also more comfortable being more open and transparent with the rest of the universe itself, with things like spiritual exploration, which to me personally is an interesting thing to do. So I don't want to like make that a carrot, but that is a true experience that I've had, and it's okay to love that. It's okay to feel pleasure in these things. Like there's nothing wrong with that. We're human beings that do experience pleasure as part of our experience of life. Yay. That's a great
What?
thing. I know, right? Just wanted to put that out there. Try to disagree with me.
I'll offer another brief carrot. Christmas morning, driving to my mother-in-law's house, got a nice hour and a half drive, and I'm thinking about how much anxiety I've had over the last few years. I got sick, and the more I got sick, the more anxiety I had, and then when I got better, the anxiety remained, and I treated it like a problem for like years. I needed to get rid of this so that I could live the life that I wanted to live. But for some reason, whatever, the grace of God, on that day when I was driving, I realized that I was holding it as a problem outside of me. So I had this crazy idea to invite it in. When I invited it in, it wasn't too long, partially because I've done this work for a while, but it didn't take too long for me to have a different relationship to it. And I realized, oh, this anxiety is actually protecting me. And I started to realize, oh, okay, I really needed it. Because there's a time when I was really sick and I needed to know what was coming and I needed to pay like hyper vigilant attention to my body and so on. So I talked to this part of myself, which was now a part of the greater whole. And I was like, do I need this anymore? Do I need this anxiety? And I realized I didn't. And so I let it go. I'm not saying it was perfect, but at the time when I let it go, I stood up straighter. Suddenly I felt like the oxygen was going into my cells. I relaxed. And I was like, could this be the greatest Christmas gift? Could this really be real? Because this has been really dogging me the last few years. And I got to tell you, it's been since Christmas, a month or two, whatever. The anxiety comes back sort of like a habit at this point. It feels like a habit creeping back in. And as long as I invite it in each time and have a relationship to it again, I can drop it again. And so this is my work now.
And Tim, I don't know your experience, but I'm going to guess that this Christmas was not the first time you tried to invite it in, or the first time you would try to make some sort of relationship with it. I could be wrong, but my guess is it has been a process, and that in this moment you saw the particular fruit of it, and that it also took time for that to sprout.
For sure,
in a
for
way.
sure, it was a grind. For sure, it was a grind, and I had to cultivate the ground and all that. But okay, so we're running out of time, so I want to say very briefly, everybody's invited. Everybody's invited to join several new free online classes offered by the Foundation for Non-Duality, taught by 3 exceptional people. And our hope is that these 3 opportunities will not only help reduce suffering, but make non-duality a living partner in your daily life. So one of these teachers is with us here today, Damon. You have maybe 20 seconds to say anything you want to say about it, and then we can close out.
Okay, awesome. Let's see, what is it? February 21st and 28th. It's a 2-part class. It's basically an introduction to non-duality, living from wholeness. And the first class is all about the personal experience. It's a lot of what we talked about today. having a relationship with all of that material. Second class is going to be how do you bring that bigger experience into relationship with another human being. There's a ton of great classes. There's one on racial division coming up on February 3rd. So check them out anyway. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
Please.
no, perfect. Well said. And listen, the Foundation for Non-Duality, we love that you've been a part of this and along for the ride. And just so you know, we live and thrive off of your donations. So anything you want to offer, help, financial assistance would be greatly appreciated. And we'll see you next month on the next Non-Dual Roundtable. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
You bless the years as they roll on by, and the days are a sign of what you're thinking. We want eternity, and you give us time, and our own lives seem to pass while we're blinking. Oh God of mysteries beyond our thinking,